32 ticks following, so they are swallowing. Monkey is swallowing. Snake self swallowing. Next, a swallow two will fly and come and swallow. You're ever swallow in a hollow gallow, making a whole lot of halabaloo. Jale kalu, we know say you chop the money some, so give me the loot. Do you really want a revolution or just your turn? Cause if you really want a revolution.
Welcome everybody to this conversation on the revolutionary power of sexual pleasure. My name is Nana Darkoa, and I am absolutely delighted to be facilitating this amazing conversation with some really incredible women. I have 3 women on the panel with me. Pamela Udoka, who's a clinical psychologist. She's a relationship and marital therapist, and she's also a sex therapist. And when we were having a conversation recently, I was saying to her that she's actually the first African sex therapist that I have met. Maybe just where I come from, we don't have many.
Honestly, I'm blown away. Since you said that, it's been in my head. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Yes, so excited. And I also have Valentine Njoroge, who is the founder of Dadasphere, a media company. She's a producer and an executive producer of 2 shows on Kenyan TV. Lots of people know her for the amazing work she did as a sex columnist, and at one point in time was the most popular sex columnist in the entire East Africa. So welcome, Valentine, and I am really looking forward to your insights. And then we also have Dr. Tlaleng Mofokeng, who recently got appointed as the UN Special Rapporteur on Health. As an activist and as somebody who's been following Dr. T, as everybody calls her, for a really long time, I'm so excited. She's also the author of Dr. T's Guide to Sexual Health and Pleasure, which is my current read on Kindle, and it's a great book. I'm sure people can see it in her camera. I recommend wholeheartedly you go out and get this now. So sisters, welcome to today's conversation.
Thank you, Nana. Thank you very much. Hello, sisters.
Thank you.
So we are going to go straight into it. And I have the same question for each of you. And maybe let me start with you, Dr. T. Why is a focus on sexual pleasure revolutionary when it comes to women?
Yes, I mean, I love that word revolution, right? Because it gives an idea of movement, of something that's dynamic, of something that's not accepting of the status quo. It gives a feeling of looking forward or a vision, doing something different. But also it's located for me firmly within our human rights as women, as queer people, to have fulfilling sexual lives and have fulfilling sexual experiences. And I call it the pleasure revolution, which is a concept that, is way before my time. But I like to speak about it now because so much of what happens to us as young people, as Black women, how we are disciplined and the messaging around our bodies and who we can have sex with and when we can have sex, I find it very disempowering. So with my book, with my work, and the sexual revolution, I'm saying we can take back our power by knowing our bodies, by being able to communicate and negotiate the type of sex that we want.
Thank you so much, Dr. T. Pamela, what's your thoughts on that?
Well, it's interesting, because before now, sex and sexual issues were known as taboo topics. Nobody talks about sex. Nobody discusses sex and sexual issues openly. So now talking about women actually having and enjoying sexual intercourse is in itself revolutionary. So you don't expect women to even admit that they even engage. And prior to now, we didn't have any information. We just get snippets of information. Maybe you chance on adults discussing something. I'm talking about when we're younger. So nobody actually had information about what to do. So now, if we are going to get that information and have that power and actually know that we can actually enjoy sexual pleasure, it's a big deal.
It's a big deal indeed. Yeah. How about you, Valentine?
Just to add on what the ladies have said, when it comes to women and our sexuality, there's always been such a strong focus on reproduction and motherhood, and our bodies don't really belong to us to do what we want with them. Rather, they are family property, and to, you know, propagate the family and carry on the family name and raise babies and all that. So for African women to turn up in their bedrooms expecting pleasure, actually saying, I'm here because it feels good to me, is revolutionary. To tell a partner, I want to participate in 1, 2, 3, and I'm not interested in XYZ, it's brand new. Actually, I don't know many African women who can even articulate themselves in that way, because as Pamela said, it's seen as taboo. And as even Dr. T pointed out, our bodies are not ours to play with. Let's put it that way. They're for family to carry on, you know, some very big things like names and inheritance and things like that, but they're not ours to play with. So for us to say, I'm going to have my body serve me, is brand new for women. And our bodies have even been quantified in financial value, so that there's a dowry attached to them. Our names change when we get married. The conversations are had completely outside of us. I know in Kenya, women don't turn up for dowry negotiations. Your uncles and the man's family, they have that conversation, and then you're handed over as property. So to even think that your body could belong to you is, yeah, it is. That's the word. It's revolutionary. Yeah.
And as you were all speaking, you were all making me think of one of the popular African feminist slogans, really advocating for this idea that a woman's body is hers, right? My body, my choice. And that was really ringing through my head. But then the other thing I was also thinking about is, yes, you know, there was this visibility right now of African feminists and African women and queer people speaking up for their rights, speaking up for their bodily rights, speaking up about the importance of sexual pleasure. But I am also thinking that in some African cultures, this idea that a woman should experience pleasure is enshrined within culture. It's just done in very sort of limited ways. Maybe she's entitled to sex, you know, as a married woman. I'm an Akan from Ghana, and I know in Akan culture, you know, a valid reason for getting divorced is if, in a sense, your husband can't have sex with you. He can't fulfill his manly obligations, to try and put it in a diplomatic way. And the book that I have just worked on and will be published next year, The Sex Lives of African Women, one of the women I interviewed, who is a Fulani woman from Cameroon, was saying to me about how she's getting divorced, and one of the legitimate reasons she's able to cite for her divorce is the fact that her husband doesn't have sex with her, you know, which makes me think of, in a sense, culture and tradition around sex and relationships. And Pamela, I was wondering, because of your experience as a marital and relationship counselor, what's your experience and what do you see in your context around this?
It's interesting to hear that we actually have a woman who wants a divorce because her husband is not satisfying her sexually. You know, that's interesting, because in Nigeria, for instance, we are patrilineal, so everything is patriarchy. So women can't say that, or they don't say that, or they didn't used to talk that way. What you will hear from my practice is infidelity. They won't say, I'm not being satisfied sexually. They will now say, okay, the man is cheating, so I'm divorcing because of infidelity. You understand? What I've also seen is people or women saying there's too much excessive demand for sexual intercourse. So because she can't cope, so she is complaining. Do you understand? So having a woman say, oh, I'm not being satisfied, I'm leaving, is strange. But I also have an interesting case study. One of my clients, she's Muslim. Her husband actually consulted me because of marital conflict issues. So while doing clinical assessment, using my marital conflict inventory, I found out that all the factors that cause marital conflict, the three in the front burner, were there. You know, the communication pattern was poor, there's a third party in the marriage interfering negatively, and of course there was sexual dissatisfaction. And the sexual dissatisfaction stemmed from the fact that this woman is complaining that her husband could not have impregnated a woman outside, because that was what she reported during individual therapy. The man has impregnated another lady outside. So meanwhile, so she is not happy with that. So of course she started giving him attitude. The communication now became poor. Now she is saying she is in the house as the wife. He is not satisfying her, and yet he went outside. And according to her then, which I was totally ignorant of, is that in Islam, it is considered a sin for you not to be able to satisfy your wife. Then you now go out or now have another woman. So if you are having 4, which your religion permits, you must satisfy all of them equally. You understand? So it was strange to me, and I actually had to go and do research after that. Is that what Islam says? So I actually got a book, Sex and Islam, and I read it, and there are all sorts of issues, concerning men satisfying their wives, and if the wife not being satisfied, can actually divorce. Okay, that's not on a religious basis. But the thing is, it is not a general norm for women to complain. We were brought up to suppress such issues. In fact, you don't even have that temerity to report that you're not being satisfied. How do you know you're not being satisfied? Which information do you have? Where did you do it before? Because we are all expected to be virgins, innocent, and going to the marriage. Yes, going to marriage, with all that piousness. So you can't complain. So it is strange to hear that women actually complain now that, oh, I'm not satisfied. So it's interesting. Very, very interesting.
Yeah. And just to say, I don't feel like it's a situation where there's a lot of women complaining, but for me, it's interesting that in some religions and in some, like, the accounts are also matrilineal, right? There's an acknowledgement in the cultural practice and the religious traditional practice that you as a woman, you have to be sexually satisfied, or at least, well, maybe they don't go to the extent of saying sexually satisfied, but at least your husband has to have sex with you. And so if that's not happening, that's a concern. But I want to pick up on what you mentioned, Pamela, about one of the complaints you get a lot of the time is, women saying that, in fact, the man is constantly demanding sex. And I'm not a professional, but my sort of layperson's view is that means sex is not enjoyable for the woman. Because if it's enjoyable, you're not going to feel like it's a burden. And I wanted to invite either Dr. T or Valentine to jump in here,
So there are 42 communities in Kenya, and I believe 38 or 39 of them practice FGM, which means, and the type of female genital mutilation varies, but all of them practice a type of clitoridectomy where they cut off the clitoris, the part of the clitoris that they can see. And some of them then stitch the labia together so that it's almost impossible for a woman or a young girl to then unseal herself pretty much and then voluntarily have sex. So on the marital night or, during the honeymoon, the husband will then unseal this. So more and more, it's illegal and people are fighting FGM and everything. But with that kind of background, as Pamela highlighted, the idea that a woman would say, I'm not enjoying sex or whatever, it's like, where did you even hear this from? What do you know about sexual pleasure? You shouldn't have had any. You shouldn't even have touched yourself, forget somebody else touching you. So with that kind of background, female pleasure is really not a priority when it comes to a lot of sexual conversations within marriages in very traditional settings. More and more in urban areas, even at the coast, there's conversation about a woman turning up in her bedroom, expecting pleasure. How does she get there and all that? As people get more and more educated, FGM, I'm happy to say, is disappearing and becoming this archaic thing. And then there's more influence from the West and also from people amongst us. Like I'm at the coast right now in Mombasa, there's a huge conversation about girls being trained. This is how you turn up in your bedroom. This is what you do for you. This is what you do for your partner. So there's more of a conversation of pleasure. And as young women, the new generation is more and more leaning towards my bedroom should be fantastic for myself and my partner. So we're seeing that changing. We're seeing that changing. Yes.
Yeah, that's
It's really good to
great.
hear about this kind of change. Yeah.
Yes. Yes. Very empowering.
Because I think for me, it's also important to talk about consent, right? And the need for the human contact and human interaction, and of course, then sexual pleasure. And the fact that, without consent, there is no pleasure. And I always like to start there because it locates the conversation within a human rights framework where we can affirm each other and our own autonomy, and the fact that these bodies are ours, and therefore by extension our vulva, our organs, everything about ourselves belongs to us first. And it's so important because even within sort of long-term established relationships or even marriages, there is some kind of sort of violations that happen. And for a lot of women, because they are not having sex when they want to have sex, they are not having sex how they want to have it, and they are not even able to incorporate lubricants or the use of sex toys because of the stigma and shame associated with it. A lot of women are having these unsatisfying, sometimes coerced sexual interactions. And then later on, and which I've seen also in the clinic where I work, is that they wonder why they have no desire for sex. There's a lot of women who will ask about, painful penetration or dryness during sex. And how often when we talk about sex and sexual pleasure, we don't often talk enough about consent, but also the psychological sort of the need to have like no anxiety, right, around sex. The fact that knowing how you are going to have sex, what's going to happen, when are we going to stop, right? How I like to be pleasured, and being able to have that conversation in the moment, right? And saying, this is where you must touch me, or take your lover's hand and put it where you want, use your hands to pleasure yourself in the meantime. All of those things are important. And there's a psychology, right, to having sex, and relaxing and knowing that you are in that moment, but that you feel safe in that moment. And I think sex has a certain vulnerability, right? There's an intimacy associated with it. People have sex for all sorts of reasons. Other people are less emotional and less attached to the person they're having sex with. But all of those experiences are valid. And I think for me, to start with consent for sex, let's talk about what we want. Let's give each other feedback in the moment, and also remove the shame and stigma of judging women who want to have pleasurable experiences. I think that's one of the first ways I think we can start to truly liberate women's experiences, is if we're having sex every single time and it's consensual every single time, and we really feel like we can truly say what we want without being judged.
Thank you so much for saying that, Dr. T. Pamela, go ahead.
Can I yeah. Okay, Valentine said something about FGM. There was advocacy against female genital mutilation, actually. So in my country, it was done as a form of precaution against female promiscuity. Okay, now what that has done for most women is to make them believe that once you are genitally mutilated, that is circumcised, then it automatically means you can't enjoy sex. So I tell them, no, because the only information we have about sexual pleasure is about the clitoris. I tell them there are other parts of the body you can orgasm with. But because of ignorance, they don't know about the nipples, they don't know about other erogenous zones of the body. They don't even know that some people even orgasm when being kissed. And if you don't know which part of your body gives you pleasure, then you have issues enjoying sexual intercourse. Now, and another thing is, if you, Dr. T mentioned something about anxiety. Anxiety also stems from the fact that most women, we have had information overload. Oh, sex is painful. You should not do it at this time. You should not, you have all sorts of information going on in your head. So you are afraid. You have got performance anxiety. Am I going to enjoy this? Is it going to be too big? Am I going to, is there going to be blood? So you are not focusing on the pleasure you are going to derive from the activity. You are focusing on the pain. So that prevents you from enjoying. the issue now is this. If more women know that there are stages of sexual intercourse, you cannot move from the desire stage where you feel, okay, I want to have sexual intercourse, I want to engage, and ignore the arousal stage and go straight to the orgasmic stage, which is where penetration occurs. You have not been properly aroused. And if you're not properly aroused, you won't be adequately lubricated. And if you're not adequately lubricated, you will not be having bruises during penetration, which is what Dr. T referred to about women having pain during sexual intercourse. All these can be avoided if the women understand their bodies and understand the process they are going through, and know that the stages have to be followed. Do seamlessly. We will have more women enjoying sexual intercourse and not just, oh, I've been circumcised, I don't have a clitoris. So, and even those who have been genitally mutilated, the clitoris, the nerves are still there, so it can still be stimulated for arousal. So let's not just say, oh, I've been there, nothing is there, so let the man enjoy and let me just endure. No, you enjoy, not endure what we should normally be enjoying with the men.
Pamela, thanks so much for saying that, because it's also a reminder, right, of how expansive the clitoris is. It's not just what we see on the outside. It's much bigger than we imagine, much bigger than what men have, But for me also, we also need to remind people that sex doesn't always need to involve penetration. Sex doesn't always need to be with a man as well. People can have sex with themselves. They can have sex with people of all genders. And I think that's like an important point for folks who are listening to remember as well. Valentine, I was wondering, because I'm thinking about your time as a sex columnist, and I'm wondering what tips you would have shared with somebody who approached you and said, I want to tap into the power of sexual pleasure. How can I do this? Just from a columnist point of view, and then we'll ask Dr. T and Pamela also from a medical and clinical point of view.
So I actually did a series on this. I think women have a lot of shame regarding our bodies and touching ourselves and not even knowing what is down there. So one of the things I suggested in the series was some mirror work. You get a little mirror and you start by looking at yourself and figuring, just seeing what your body looks like and accepting it for what it is. We accept our faces, we accept our waistlines, whatever the battle may be there. But when it comes to our vulva and our labia and all that, there's a level of shame. And if you've been watching porn or something like that, there's not, it's not the most accessible thing to find well shot, like African or Black pornography to even have that as a starting point. So I think it's important for women and even for men to just look at your body, start by accepting what it is, spend some time figuring out, the erogenous zones that Pamela mentioned, what works for you. Is your left nipple more sensitive than your right nipple? Is your, what's going on with your clitoris, what's going on with your labia? Because if you don't know what works for you, it's very difficult to then engage with a partner and let them know I like this, or even move their hands to the appropriate place. So I think it really it's a journey of self. You have to figure out what works for you, and then we don't always have the words in the moment to say these things. So maybe then move your partner's hands there. And then also dealing with pleasure, like if you touch yourself and it feels good, some of us want to stop. You're like, oh, it feels too good. I can only do this for 1 minute or 2 minutes. Like, just acknowledge the feelings and the judgments and the thoughts that are coming up for you. Because sometimes you can have a very giving lover, but you're the one who's having a problem receiving pleasure or being the focus of this sexual act. You want to be more the giver than you want to receive. So there's all that, and I think it's very much a personal journey. So to me, it starts with accepting your body, exploring your body, and even just accepting, okay, when this happens, I feel this way, and exploring where that comes from. Do I feel shame about pleasure? Do I feel like I don't deserve pleasure? Do I, all of that. And then before even incorporating other people. Yes. So I think that's where the revolution begins, with you personally in your bedroom with your fingers and figuring out your body parts. Yes.
I love that. The revolution begins with you in the bedroom. I love it. And Dr. T, I have to say, one of the parts of your book that I enjoyed the most was when you were sharing your experience of being on a radio station, and this woman called up and was basically asking you questions around orgasms, and then you realized after a while that she was doing everything you were saying live and colored, but I don't want to give out too much so other people can go and read that for themselves. But from a medical perspective, what would be your advice to a woman who struggles to, have an orgasm?
Yeah, and I think it's also to demystify and affirm other sexual experiences, and not focus solely on that orgasm. I've also had patients who are saying that they can't have an orgasm, but when they explain to me the different phases of arousal, the enjoyment and the excitement, and how their bodies are responding to the excitement and the stimulation, they actually have had an orgasm. But sometimes we have this idea of fireworks, and maybe we just see too many movies and romantic comedies, and have such high expectations, and sometimes we're outside of what our body will do. And so I've had people who thought they were not having an orgasm when they actually were. And once we talk about it, they actually get it. They're like, oh, that's what it is. So it's not always going to be toe curling, thunder thighs and fireworks every single time. And the fact that you are in the moment and the enjoyment of sex in itself, it's actually quite affirming. And we need to normalize the fact that you can have sex and no one actually will have an orgasm, right? And when you still have people talking about delaying of orgasm, the delay of the pleasure, they start, doing the especially when you're someone who's into kink and all of those other stuff, there's something about like preserving that energy, right? So even just the idea of orgasm suddenly changes, and people feel so powerful by actually delaying getting an orgasm. But you can't even start experimenting with that type of play if you are so anxious and just stressing just to get to an orgasm, that you are not even allowing your mind and your body to experience and truly feel and get the feedback from your body. I always say to people, everyone is just wanting to thrust, but no one wants to pause and actually just feel, well, what does this feel like in my body, and how does my breasts respond, how do my toes and my legs feel, how does the back of my neck feel, right? So that you are experiencing all of that in totality and not rushing through all of it just to get to an orgasm. And by the way, for many people, sex starts with an erect penis and it stops with the ejaculation of a penis. So if you're not having a penis and you are having sex, how are you then judging if you are having good sex? If your marker of good sex is on someone else's body? What about people who are not having sex with penises? What about them, life and their judgment of enjoyment? So we have to talk about and affirm all types of sex: vagina to vagina sex, penis to anus sex, mouth to vagina, mouth to anus. All of it is valid. And it's about people experiencing all of those in their fullness and not really focusing too much on the orgasm, because even in medical literature, in pop culture, in music, movies, it's usually the pleasure of men that's portrayed, right? And that's affirmed as sex, as pleasurable, as good enough as an experience. So for me, as part of my activism, as part of the pleasure revolution, I'm very, very, very deliberate about centering other types of sex and other types of pleasure beyond the presence of a penis in the sex.
Thank you so much. And
actually,
thank you
can I just add something?
Go ahead.
Yes, I love what you said, Dr. T, because you highlighted that there's a pleasure gap. We talk about the gender wage gap, but I don't think we talk enough about the pleasure gap, where we define sex in very masculine terms. So as Dr. T has said, it starts with an erect penis and it ends with male ejaculation. But what about, so even in that, women and our experience of sexuality and sexual intercourse or any kind of sexual play is completely left out of the conversation. It's like, you don't matter, you're a by the way. We say we had sex 3 times because a man had 3 orgasms. But what about me? What if I had sex? What if I had 6 orgasms? Does that not count? What if He didn't have any orgasms. I had all the orgasms. Did the sex even happen? You know, there are people walking around calling lesbians virgins because there's no penis in the room in the first place. So I think I love what you're saying about centering other sexual experiences, because it also has a bigger connotation when it comes even to how we talk about sexual violence. I know we're focused on pleasure, but in the absence of clear definitions, when something happens to somebody without their consent, if all we know is that intercourse is penis and masculine experience, then a woman defining her experience and saying, I did not consent to this, therefore I'm not okay with this, and this is a criminal act, is then, you understand, like, it's like the female perspective doesn't matter for pleasure, it doesn't matter for the criminality, it doesn't matter if there's violence. So we need to centralize all these sexual experiences so we can have a clear conversation about what is welcome, what is permitted, what is to be celebrated, and what is to be clearly criminalized and left out of the bedroom, so to speak.
Absolutely. And I feel like if there's some of the takeaways that people watching this, you know, should really be taken away, is that we really need to expand our understanding of sex, right? And sex is pleasure, and sex is expansive, and sex can be had with yourself and with people of the same gender or different genders. And, you know, we need to really decenter the penis. And for me as well, you know, we need to think of penises in diverse ways, which includes strap-ons, which includes vibrators, which includes dildos. And I feel like the more that we practice that, the easier it becomes for ourselves, you know, and for our ability to negotiate pleasurable sex. But I'm wondering, yes, please jump in. I was about to ask you a particular question, because I wonder what advice you give to couples, you know, when they come with this kind of scenario. Are you able to tell them that you need to, like, sort of shift how you think about sex?
Yes. Before I answer that, let me just shed more light or add my voice to what Dr. T and Valentine said. I tell women who approach me, or when I have speaking engagements, I say, some women, if you offer them orgasm in a platter, they won't know what it is. So when Dr. T was saying they don't even know they have orgasm, I was just laughing because it's true. They expect maybe there to be some fireworks, you know, when there is orgasm, or you know, they've heard all sorts. So they don't allow their bodies to speak to them, to tell them when they have moved from a normal state to a sexually pleasurable state. They don't do that. They just feel, okay, they are expecting the fireworks to happen, and then they miss the nitty-gritty of the enjoyment. Okay, so women who have never orgasmed or who don't know what orgasm is like, what I tell them, exploration. Let your partner explore your body, you know, either through massage or just sensual touches, you know, from the tips of your hair to the soles of your feet. Let him move, or let your partner move, and you will know which parts are sensuous, which parts gets you aroused. And you have to be aware too, you know, self-awareness. Is it my left nipple? Is it my right ankle? Is it my little toe on my left leg? Is it the nape of my neck? You have to be aware. You have, you know, they are thinking of the destination of the sexual activity, not the process, not the movement, not you know, they don't approach it with, oh, I must enjoy each stage before I get to the final destination, which is the explosive part. But because they don't know, they keep losing it. And all this idea of, oh, is the man that must give me pleasure. Oh, the man did not give me orgasm. The man did not make me enjoy sex. Hello, women. You have the power to give yourself orgasm. If it's touching you, and your right breast, maybe it's touching the breast in a particular way, and you're not feeling it, hey, guy, please, can you try my right thigh? That's where it is. You understand? Guide him, because you understand your body now. Don't just leave everything to him. So by the time he ejaculates, that's the end of the story. No. Before he ejaculates, you two, you are part of the process. So you can even have this orgasm together. And when you talk about delayed orgasm, a man who understands his onions, who has this flow with his partner will realize that, okay, she's not yet there. Let me delay so that by the time she's coming, we can now come together. But because we don't feel, oh, let him just do, I will just be there. No, women, you have the power. But because we don't understand our bodies, we don't know how to give ourselves pleasure, we just let everything ride. And then Dr. T, when you said something about how the woman orgasms without knowing, it just rings a bell. Because now answering your question, Nana, or you tell a partner, maybe during individual therapy, tell me what you know about sexual intercourse. How were you introduced to sex? When we take sexual history. Because the way you were introduced to sex has implication for what you are enjoying now. Was your first sexual experience pleasurable? Was it coerced? Were you sexually abused by who? All those things have implication for how you are navigating the sexual process now. But because we don't know all those things, so by the time my clients come to me and I say, okay, let me do a clinical assessment. They say, clinical assessment for sex? I said, yes, because there are a lot of things that go on in the back end before the sexual intercourse. It's not just about the meeting of a penis and a vagina. It happens long before then. So women have to know these things and know how to enjoy the process and not just think about the destination or the end stage of that destination.
Yes. And I also feel like we have to extend a lot of grace to women who are not having pleasurable sex for all of the reasons that we spoke about, right? It's because we're socialized not to think of sex as a right. And I wanted to ask Dr. T, what shifts for us when we think of sex as a right and pleasurable, consensual sex as a right?
It's so important, and that's actually where I was going now in terms of my thoughts, right? Because it's so important, and there's this thing that women who've had their menopause experience sort of another surge, right? Another experience in terms of their sexuality and sexual pleasure. And often, you have that saying, Stella got her groove back kind of thing, right? And there is something to be said. And research has shown that when women are less anxious about getting pregnant, they tend to enjoy sex better, which tells us that to have pleasurable sex, to talk about the sexual rights around sex, it means we need to talk about the reproductive health commodities that should be available to all of us in our public health systems and our clinic and hospitals that will make sure that we are having good, healthy sex and experiences, which means access to the internal condom should be everywhere in public spaces. Lubricants should be everywhere in public spaces. We should be talking about, modern contraception methods that African women can have access to beyond just the injectable or some high dose pill, right? Because we know even the contraception that we can take sometimes has side effects that affect our desire, our libido, our ability to be lubricated, and sometimes climax. And so even the consultations that we are having in our public health systems have to be affirming of women's right to have pleasurable experiences, which means our nurses, our doctors, psychologists, social workers, physiotherapists have to know about sexual pleasure and all the rights that are requiring to be realized for us to have pleasurable experiences, so that the services we are receiving are stigma-free, they are judgment-free, but also that they are made with literal access to all of these safer sex tools, so that we are relaxed, we are not worried about getting pregnant, and we understand how our contraception work, what makes it not work well, what makes it fail, what do I do when I think I'm pregnant. I mean, we can even talk about the issues of having sex when you are menstruating on your period. For many cultures, many religious beliefs, a woman who is on her period is seen as not clean or as dirty. All of these taboos, we need to challenge them, right? Because for some people, when they are ovulating, when they are on their menstruation and they're on their period, that's when they are at mostly aroused, right? So we need to talk about all of these different cycles and what the hormones does to our body, and the fact that at different points in our cycle, we may experience different, in terms of desirability, in terms of pleasure, and then of course we may need different health solutions depending on what it is that we are experiencing. So the right to have pleasurable experiences is linked to consent and having sex that's free of violence and free of coercion, but also has to be matched with the health care that will be affirming and enabling of you to take full advantage of your sexual life and sexuality, regardless of your reproductive health cycle.
And I feel like that's one of the huge challenges, right? The access to good reproductive health care, and more importantly, stigma-free, judgment-free. Go ahead, Valentine.
Okay, so I grew up in a relatively liberal setup, in that it was very important to my mother that I understand my body. I mean, it's very much a Christian family, but still she wanted me to have a very clear sex education. And also she was very clear that sex is for pleasure, not purely for reproduction. And I think society, as Dr. T is saying about menopause, society really places a lot of restriction around female sexuality because of reproduction. It's not so much that they care about women, it's that they care about the eggs and who's getting to them and what kind of children will come out of these eggs and all of that stuff. So, a liberated woman who will say, for example, I can have intercourse with a man who's not doing too well financially because I can, take care of my children. That society is not interested in that. They want to tell girls and women, this is who you marry, this is how you reproduce and all that. But given the way that I grew up, it still took me until my 30s to get to a point where my sex life was purely mine by design, even with all that education and a permissive kind of environment. And what I really got out of taking on my sexuality as my own is it placed me as a person first and center in my life. I started then treating myself like I matter. What works for me matters. My life needs to work for me. So that for me was the very empowering thing of claiming my sex life and my body and dealing with it on my terms based on my values and what works here. So and I'd love to see more of that for more African women. I hope that makes sense. Have I gone round and round in circles?
No, that makes a lot of sense. And Pamela, you had also wanted to add some thoughts to that conversation.
Very fast. Dr. T mentioned something about menopause. I wanted to talk to women about not putting information in their heads that prevents them from enjoying or having sexual pleasure. Okay? As a clinical psychologist, I let them know that sex starts from the mind. If you have it in your mind that, okay, I'm in my perimenopausal stage or I'm menopausing, so it's normal, I'm not supposed to enjoy sex, then you blank your mind. When I have clients like that, or when I have opportunities to speak at events, I tell the women, using a technique that one of the techniques in therapy, which is modeling, using the therapist uses his or herself as an example. I tell them, I'm 55 years old. Obviously, I'm menopausing, or I'm in my menopausal stage, but I still enjoy amazing sex with my husband. So don't blank your mind and say, oh, when you're in menopause, you enjoy sex, so you now relax. Okay, I'm in menopause now. No, I will enjoy. That's wrong, a wrong attitude. And then when Valentine says, oh, her mother, or was it a grandmother that told her about sexual education and sexuality, it's fantastic. I tell mothers, teach your children, give them appropriate information. A child is growing up, the child can communicate. Let the child know the appropriate names of the body parts. A vagina is a vagina. A penis is a penis. A finger is a finger. The eye is the eye. Don't tell the child, oh, this is your ear, this is your finger, then your vagina is your VV, or your penis is your PP. So by the time the child now grows a little, now say, okay, penis is no longer penis. So it is now, it's no longer PP, it's now penis. The vagina is no longer VV, it's now. So the child is processing that information and then is now a puberty stage. When during puberty, let the child know, okay, you are going to menstruate or you are menstruating. These are the consequences of you not seeing your period or you having inappropriate relations with another boy. Let boy also know that, oh, I shouldn't be doing this. These are the consequences. So they grow up with age-appropriate information. So by the time they are now mature adults, they know that, okay, if we have sexual intercourse, these are the consequences. And let them also know that it is not only pregnancy that is the outcome of sexual intercourse. There are all, you have infections, you have diseases, there are all sorts of things that can happen. When these children have this information, they can navigate anything they want to, in terms of sexual intercourse. Let's not just limit them to information that does not add value to their lives. Okay, information is key. Information is power. While we're giving them all other information and about their lives, let us also give them information about their sexual issues or sexuality. Okay.
Thank you so much for mentioning that, Pamela. It's so important. And I know that for myself, growing up, I definitely felt I did not have access to comprehensive sex education. And, sadly, that's still like a very controversial topic in so many of our African countries. But I think, like you mentioned, information is power. I also really appreciate what you said about even sharing some of your own experiences with like people you meet when you're speaking to them. And I firmly believe in that feminist adage, the personal is political. So I'm coming to ask each of you a very personal question. And I am assuming that you all have pleasurable sex lives, or at least that's what I wish for you guys. So I want to know, how did you get to that point in your own life, right, where you could tap into your own sexual pleasure? I'll start with you, Valentine, then Dr. T, and end with you, Pamela. So Valentine.
I think I tapped into my sexual pleasure when I stopped listening to other people about my sexuality, and I had a little meeting with myself, and I asked myself what I really wanted out of my sex life. And then I went about creating it, and also a very clear picture of who I'm interested in having a sexual relationship with, and what I want, what are the fundamentals, the must-haves for my sexual relationships. And for me, consent, as Dr. T said, is a very big thing. I also want a sense of respect with, whoever is going to become a part of my sex life. I don't adhere to the idea of casual sex where you treat your partners casually. I think, you can have a really beautiful experience with other human beings, and it all starts with everybody feeling seen, feeling heard, feeling valued. Not everybody you have sex with becomes a life partner. That's a different conversation. So once I had a clear distinction of these two things, then I was able to, create a sex life that brings me joy. I don't know that it would necessarily bring Pamela or Dr. T or yourself, Nana, joy, but it works for me. And I believe it works for my partners as well. So that was very important to me, yes.
No, thank you for sharing that. How about you, Dr. T?
Self-play, self-discovery, and self-pleasure first. I think that has been the key ingredient. When I know what feels good for me, I'm able to tell my partner and negotiate what I need to happen for me to feel good. And I think self-play, self-pleasure, self-discovery has been a really good thing. And unlearning some of the messaging, right, that we have as young Black women about the fact that sex is something that's done to us, that we must be grateful if men find you desirable and they have sex with you. So all of those things are very important for me because I'm desirable, I'm enough, I'm in my fullness as I am first, and I've come to a relationship full already. And I think it's part of the self-discovery, and it's a continuing journey. So what my body could do in my 20s is very different now to what my body does in my mid-30s, navigating life and stress and all sorts of things. And so even the kind of discussions and the communications that are happening with my own partner are about managing expectations of what even I can do and how I can show up in our sex life. And so I think that's what it is for me.
I really appreciate you sharing that, Dr. T. Pamela?
Yes, thank you very much. I think mine is the reverse. I didn't come with this knowledge, oh, sex is this. No, I had no prior information about what sex should be or what sexual intercourse should be. I was basically groping in the dark because I grew up in a town in Cameroon called Kumba. And then sex was a bad thing. That's what it was called. So that's how I grew up. So I was groping in the dark, assuming I was enjoying what I was doing. You understand? But not saying whether you are or not. Until when I had this aha moment was when I was doing my first master's degree in Unilag. And late Professor Peter Moluabi, who started me in this journey of sexual intercourse and sexuality career, was teaching us about sexual response cycle, sexuality. I'm like, oh, this thing has actually been scientifically documented. And I remember one particular time in class, he went on and he said, and that is called double orgasm. And I was like, oh, it has a name. Because you are feeling something, but you don't know what it is. So now with that information, I actually went back, to tell my husband, oh boy, this is what it is. Oh, this is what we are doing. This is the name of it, what it is called. So we now start operating from a point of knowledge, not just groping in the dark. But I had made up my mind years ago that I will not just enjoy, because I realized that men enjoy. Once a man has ejaculated, to me, then he has had his orgasm. So I made up my mind that, okay, I'm not going to just do it for doing sake. I'm going to enjoy it as well. So now having the information, having the knowledge on how the process should be, I try to enjoy more, and then also teach others who consult me how to enjoy sexual pleasure.
Knowledge is power indeed. So I want to make a bit of a pivot, because for most of this conversation, I've made a deliberate choice to focus on women's sexual pleasure, but I want us to pivot a little bit to also talk about men and masculinities, right? So not just cis men, but trans men and masculine human beings. And I think that it's very easy for us to assume, that mainly, especially in heterosexual relationships, that for men, sex is almost always pleasurable. But I even think that when it comes to men and sex, there's a revolution that is yet to be had, right? And I wonder, what could that look like? And I'm going to start with you, Dr. T.
I think it's about letting go of the script of how sex should be, and the fact that, for example, this heteronormative ways, right, of sexual expression and pleasure also finds its way and replicates even within queer relationships. The fact that just because you are masculine doesn't mean that you can never receive penetration, for example. I think is an important thing. I think it's also important, especially for cis men, to know that their ego should not be tied to the size of their penis or what their penis does to somebody, so that people understand that you can have an erection and be okay that that erection just goes away as well without it going to penetrate anybody. I think we need to talk about hypersexualization of certain masculinities and how that is harmful even for themselves. So for me, it would be about, and again, locating the discussion within consent. The fact that without consent, there is no pleasure, and that even masculine presenting people must be affirmed in wanting to be desired, so that they don't feel this pressure or play into the script of always chasing people and trying to convince people to have sex with them or coerce them to a point where they are weak and they give up and give in and then have sex with them. We need to talk about those relationships and those types of scenarios as not affirming, as coercive, as not good at all, and they are a violation. But part of doing that is saying that even if you are masculine, you too need to know that your partner desires you. So let them, give them a chance to desire you and to communicate that, as opposed to this entangled situation where penis size, how many rounds you have in a night, how long you can keep an erection is all tied into the ego, and often on what you can do to other people or what that penis can do to feminine presenting people. So I think for me, those are the types of discussions. Let go of the script, understand consent, be be desirable as a person, and really just, separate your ego from your genitals.
Oh, I mean, that's a slogan. Separate your ego from your genitals. I want that on a t-shirt somewhere. Pamela, I'm wondering if in your practice you've seen positive signs where men and sexuality are concerned. I wonder if there are differences between, like, people from our grandfather's era to our father's era to young men of today.
Well, there's a difference. I think years ago, our grandfathers, our fathers, they had other priorities, as it were. They had other measures of knowing their masculinity, either the size of their farms, their yam bands, the number of wives they were married and children they had. But now they also had this age grade system where the young men and young women, at certain ages, they're in particular age grades, and they had the ideals of society, the culture, cultural teachings, that they taught the young ones. But nowadays, we find the young men, all they think about is, I want a large penis. I want to last longer during sexual intercourse. They just believe that, it's about progress. The longer you last, then you are a man. So it now puts them under pressure. You now see them abusing sexual enhancers, and you even see older men who, because of the stress of society and other vagaries of the environment, they maybe are now suffering from high blood pressure and diabetes, for instance. Instead of treating the causes of the diabetes or the high blood pressure, which inhibits turgidity, they now go to buy sexual enhancers, which in the long term harms other organs of the body. And I tell men, most men don't know that what gives them erection or what makes their penis turgid is blood. So if you have high blood pressure and you're taking medication that suppresses your BP, of course it's going to suppress everything. You can't have an erection. So now imagine buying a sexual enhancer that pumps blood into your penis by reducing blood flow to other minor organs. You are just confusing your whole system and harming other organs of the body. So if there's a revolutionary approach to sexual pleasure, then we realize that they don't need all that pressure to please women, because women now also understand that they have a contribution to make for the sexual pleasure to be dual. I tell them, it is called an intercourse for a reason. Intercourse means you are interacting with somebody. It's not a solo effort. So if the men understand this, that women are now into the game, they now know that they can have sexual intercourse and enjoy it, and also contribute to sexual pleasure, then they won't be under pressure to take sexual enhancers. They won't be under sexual pressure to buy drugs which supposedly enlarges their penis. I tell them, how do you buy a drug and your penis is this size and you want it to be this size or the size of your wrist? It doesn't work. So by the time they have been scammed, they can't now go and say, what I bought didn't work. My penis is still the same size. So because nobody is complaining about, the product not working, because nobody wants to admit that they bought such a product in the first place, that market is thriving. So let the men realize that, they don't have to be under any pressure, because the women too are into the game. And of course, we will live happily ever after. And that will also take away the conflict from relationships which arise from sexual dissatisfaction. Okay? And we'll have some stability in relationships, because if both of them can discuss sexual issues, which usually is a taboo topic, when you can discuss how to please your partner, how your partner should give and receive pleasure, then you can discuss any other thing in your relationship, be it property, be it finances, so you can be open with each other. If you can talk about sex in a relationship openly with your partner, you can discuss any other thing. And of course,
that's a good note for us to bear in mind. And I want to share some questions that we got that viewers want answers to, but we're running out of time. So I'm also going to ask for your responses to be brief and succinct. I'm actually going to direct the first question to you, Valentine. And this question came from Lily von Stackelberg from Germany. And she wants to know, how do we communicate our sexual needs to a partner without offending them, especially men?
That's a tricky one, because, as Pamela was speaking, I was remembering that the most frequently asked questions from men when it came to sex, for my column, were based on erectile dysfunction, premature ejaculation, and impotence. You know, men are very, well, at least Kenyan men are very concerned about performance. Not so much like that the partner enjoys, but that his performance is rated highly and that his body performs. Whereas women actually turn up very concerned about the relationship and wanting to, you know, make sure that everybody remains whole. I think sexuality sex is an intimate act because you need to take care of your partner even as much as you're taking care of yourself. I would say be honest, but also kind. Strive to be kind as well as honest and respectful. You know your partner's vulnerabilities. So now is not the time to highlight everything that they're doing wrong. I wouldn't sit down with my partner and say, I need you to do 1, 2, 3 because this is going wrong. I wouldn't do that. I would more so suggest what would work for me, but also highlight, come from a point of, as Dr. T has mentioned several times, discovery, adventure, like play. You don't know me, you don't know, you're not the expert on my body and my sexuality, right? We are coming to this with an attitude of play and adventure so that we can discover new things. Also, whatever you did with previous partners or whatever doesn't necessarily translate into this dynamic. So I would suggest to a partner, let's come at it with adventure and play and discovery. So don't take it like if I say I want to be kissed this way, that I'm saying you're a bad kisser. I'm just saying I want to be kissed this way. It's not a commentary on you and your abilities and your performance. So I would urge women and men, like, talk about this and coming to your sex life with that spirit of adventure and play. And then constantly checking with your partner, okay, we said we're going to try this. How's it going for you? Do you want to continue? Are we dumping this? Are we keeping it in the repertoire? Are we dumping it? So constantly checking, but also have like a sense of humor about it, because sex should be fun. You know, it's not your PhD. You know, it can be fun, it can be exciting and all that. So some things work, you keep them. Some things don't work, you dump them. And maybe you revisit next year. You know, maybe you hated tennis last year and now you've tried it again. And you're like, oh, maybe it's not so bad. You know what I mean? So that sense of experimenting.
Thank you so much. And I'm going to direct this question to you, Dr. T, which is from Zemdina A from Ethiopia. And she wants to know, what are your views on femdom through the lens of radical African feminism? And I have to confess, I looked up femdom and it literally means female domination. And I was like, I'm not sure this is what we're talking about, but I'll let you answer that, Dr. T.
Yeah, look, I think for any sexual play and any experimentation or any sort of discovery that, you know, people desire, need to be spoken about and discussed with whoever it is that you want to be playing with or discovering with. I think we take for granted that everyone just understands what are all these different types of sexual play and sexual fantasies. And also it's important to research together. So find out what types of dominations there are, what types of those ideas turn you on, and also then turn your different partners or your partner on, and find a middle ground where you agree on the boundaries, you agree on how to give each other feedback in the moment, you agree and actually research how to do this safely. Some people use latex, some people use bondage, some people use whips and chains. You need to know how to tie different knots properly. If you are using handcuffs, for example, you need to know which to buy, that the person that you've cuffed, they can remove those cuffs without needing a key or needing assistance. If you're using anything that's going to impede the mouth or speech, or you know, for you to be able to communicate, what hand signals are you going to use? What eye signals are you going to use? And there has to be an element of trust. Consent is important. And if you are feeling vulnerable and you can't, or maybe your partner is pushing you into that and you are not sure, perhaps let them know, because safety and feeling safe and creating that safety is very, very important. But read up together and find out between your own personal fantasy and what your partner wants, what is the middle ground. And it's a graduated thing. You're not going to start from absolutely no fantasy and no play to extreme domination. There is power in that. There is power in surrendering. There is power in taking up that space in your relationship. But it has to be a negotiated thing, that everyone who's involved, has buy-in.
Thanks so much, Dr. T. And Pamela, I have a challenge for you because you literally have just 1 minute to answer this question, right?
Okay.
And this is a question from Pamela Agila from Ireland. And she's saying, and I feel like this is a bit of a cynical question, but maybe I'm reading too much. Is this too, she's questioning the fact that there were 4 people, all women, on this panel, and she's asking, are women the only repository of knowledge about and authority on sex? So what's the answer to her, Pamela?
Well, maybe we are the ones that are more vocal because we are the ones that have been cheated out of sexual pleasure for such a long time. So we're not trying to regain our voices. I'm sure there are men somewhere who can talk about sex the way women do. But for now, just bear with us. Let us enjoy our limelight. That, okay, yes, men have been having fun all these years. Okay, women, we are back. Hello, women. We have to talk about it and let men know that we too have a role to play in getting a sexual pleasure or receiving sexual pleasure as good as we have been giving them.
Thank you, Pamela. That was a perfect response. And thank you, Dr. T. Thank you, Valentine. Thank you, Pamela. You've been such amazing panelists. This has been a fascinating conversation. My name is Nana Darkoa, and it's been my pleasure.
Bye. Thank you so much.
If you ever need a new place to go, you can join me in a world of words. When it seems like I'm nowhere to be found, if you look, you'll find me in a book. Let's take a ride to the past in the back of a phoenix. Let's float around the moon. You'll never be alone, now you know where to look. Find me, find you, find the word in a book. You'll never be alone, now you know where to look. Find me, find you, find the word in a book.
Stranger's Guide is not a typical American travel magazine. Our mission is to dive deep into a single location, commissioning work from great writers and photographers, famous individuals, as well as up-and-coming new voices. This year, we decided to go to Lagos. And we are proud of the volume we produced, with original work from some of Nigeria's best writers and photographers, working with luminaries like Wale Soyinka, Molara Wood, and Femi Kuti. We think this is a very special volume, and we're so excited to bring it back to Lagos.
Sticky, spicy, sweet.
Oh yeah, I want to go there. No. Don't touch me.
I will get you arrested.
See me.
Very, very easy. Relax, everybody.
He shot you.
5 minutes madness only you can understand. Visit myspectre.com to get your Spectre experience. Spectre, loans in 5 minutes.